So, as you know, it wasn't just some councils that Reform UK won. They happened to win two regional mayoralships as well. And so far, really nothing majorly bad or crazy has happened on these councils. Andrea Jenkins is, of course, still being Andrea Jenkins, saying and, doing crazy stuff. But overall, not a lot is really happening on that council, at least 6 months in. Oh, they've had this big Lincolnshire festival. No one even knows at the moment if it's actually worth having this festival or even continuing to fund said festival because they don't even know if the first one was even profitable yet. So the case and the jury is still out on whether Andrew Jenkins's first year is going to be even somewhat of a success. Meanwhile, of course, today we'll be covering Luke Campbell. Now, the last time we covered Luke Campbell, his entire top team staff had basically just walked out because he was trying to hire this guy who was part of his campaign team, but he couldn't be hired because you can't make appointments of people who've been part of your political team. So he couldn't hire him, but Campbell wanted that. We've also heard that he's had disagreements with his staff, like wanting to book like first-class train tickets and travel. And they were saying, no, you can't do that. So eventually this came to a head and they all ended up walking out. You've also had the continuing head-to-head with the fact that he will say at some points he's for like green energy and green investment, and then other times he will then turn around and say, oh no, I'm completely against green energy and green investment, and trying to like straddle this line where he's both for and against it. But as I've always said right from the start of this, he cannot have his cake and eat it. His party is coming down on the complete anti-side of it, and that type of green investment, that green energy net zero stuff, especially in Hull, is a big job provider. It is a big employer in that region and gives the region a lot of economic activity. Where if Reform UK gets in and gets rid of it, that's his area in a very bad situation. So what's he been up to since then? Well, not a lot. It's been all very quiet on honestly the Luke Campbell front. It's been very, very quiet. We haven't covered him really for a couple of months. It's since what, 2 or 3 months, I think, after he first got in, all that stuff started to kick off and happen. And since then, nothing. Very similar stuff for Andrea Jenkins. There's been little to sort of nothing really to talk about, except the fact that she's now opposing her council. Like, she wants to work from home, but like the area council has gone, no, we're fine. We'll keep working from home, which is kind of a big difference, kind of a very big difference on that one. But like I say, we're talking about Luke Campbell today, and the Hull Live decided to ask residents of Hull and Beverley in these two areas, what do you think of Luke Campbell? What do you think of his mayorship? 6 months in to his appointment. And quite frankly, no one knows what he's done. Like, no one knows what he's done, which is not too surprising because no one knows what he's done. And even I'm trying to follow and keep up with this, but he doesn't seem to be doing a heck of a lot. And I said this again when he immediately got in. There are two other regional mayoralships which started a year before, both Andrew Jenkins and, of course, the one in Hull. In a year's time, people will look back and go, well, this is where they are. Where are you? What have you done in your first year? And that is when I think people are really going to start hitting home on the fact that Luke Campbell, not being a politician, not having a single clue on what to actually do, looking after this, being in a very important position, these regional mayors, I think he's going to be an incredible detriment to Reform UK, an incredible detriment going forward. So we'll see how this story develops as always. But before we do go on to today's stuff, we'll ask you to, of course, remind you, should we say, about the fact, the like, the share button. Don't forget, of course, to ring the bell. Again, so you get notifications when we go live or we drop a new video. Down below, Patreon page, buy me coffee link. We can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there is the YouTube membership down below as well. There's also a little QR code. getting mixed up there. Up there, so that you can click on or really scan. That'll take you straight, of course, to the Patreon page as well. So thank you very much to all those people who do help and support. And of course, on with today's show. So they went and asked, "What do you think of Luke Campbell?" And one response was quite comical. So the people of Hull and East Yorkshire have now shared their thoughts on Luke Campbell's first 6 months as regional mayor. We spoke to both residents in Hull and Beverley to try and gauge the public's opinion. The former Olympic gold medalist has now been in office as the mayor of Hull and East Yorkshire for over half a year now, having been elected back in May, having stood as a Reform UK candidate in an election. The Hull-born athlete turned businessman beat the leaders of both East Riding City Council and Hull City Council, amongst others, when elected as mayor. So to mark his first 6-month anniversary, we decided to ask the people of the region what they thought of Mr. Campbell's time in office. And critically, what people actually know about what the mayor has been up to since being elected. In an attempt now to try and get a broad range of voices, we spoke to residents of both Hull City Council and the East Riding Council, who are now two councils that make up both the combined authority that Campbell now heads. So this is the comedy response. Despite one man who asked what he thought of Luke Campbell responded, "Is that a type of soup?" Shows you how much of an impact Luke Campbell is actually having as a mayor in that region. It was reassuring to at least see that almost everyone, at least we spoke to, was fully aware of who Campbell was and knew that he'd been elected as mayor. However, apart from, of course, being elected as mayor, few people could actually say much more about what Campbell had been up to in the last 6 months. We first spoke to Dave and Steve outside the Prospect Centre in Hull. Both said they had not heard much about what the mayor had been up to since May. However, Dave said he had read up on at least the perceived conflict of interest between the ambitions of Campbell's political party, Reform UK, and that of the region when it comes to green energy. And that, of course, will be a big problem for Campbell. A very, very big problem. That is only going to hurt him more, because if he comes down on Reform UK side, being, anti-net zero, anti-green energy, that hurts his region. Very, very specifically hurts his region. So if he goes onto that side, then he could risk a falling out with Tice, maybe Farage, who knows? So that is something, that's why he's been very much on the fence about this constantly. Of I'm not for all this net zero green energy stuff, and then he goes, I'm for it completely. He flip flops constantly back and forth between these two positions every single moment. So at least that is something that someone has at least picked up on that one, because I think that's going to become a lot more of a problem the longer he's in office. So, also in Hull City Centre, we spoke to Leslie Abbey and Anne Pickett. Leslie did feel that if Mr. Campbell was elected more on sentiment, more on actually political merit, saying, "I like the bloke, but he's not a politician. I'm not sure he'll be good enough." They both did wish the mayor well and did felt that his heart was, quote, in it, but was unsure now of his credentials. Again, this came up numerous times. On this. He has never been a politician. He's never, ever done anything political in his life. That is a big detriment. This is a big job. He is in charge of this entire region. And if he doesn't know what he's doing, then this region is going to miss out on a whole range of stuff, because he just doesn't know what to do, because he misses out on stuff. He doesn't use the money wisely to invest in the region, which he now has access to. If you've seen some stuff recently of Andy Burnham, Manchester, because again, the stuff he's been doing, they've managed to increase the growth of the city by like 3%. He's been crowing about it very recently, but again, quite rightly so, because he's had a very good success managing to somewhat close the gap of that north-south divide when it comes to growth. So that is very good that he's been able to do that. But it goes to show you what regional mayors can do. Oliver Coppard not only brought public transport back under public ownership, but he's brought Supertram back under public ownership. reopening, of course, Doncaster Sheffield Airport. That is going to be a big thing for the region. So regional mayors can do a heck of a lot and kind of a big impact. What's Luke Campbell's big plan? What's his big ideas? Nothing. He's not even bringing public transport back under local ownership, as far as I'm aware, because it's not something I think he ran on. But we'll see in the future whether he maybe makes some U-turns, because you've seen all these Labour mayors say, right, we're going to bring public transport back under public ownership, especially when it comes to buses. So far, Luke Campbell's really not done a lot. And he's really not impressing a number of people 6 months in. So a number, of course, of other people, including Leslie, were, of course, very encouraged by his relatively young age. They felt this could be at least advantage, while many, of course, mayors up and down the country are well into their 50s or above. Campbell is, of course, quite a bit younger at 38. Chris and Christine Gresby were, of course, not even aware of what Mr. Campbell had actually been up to, but said, no news is good news. And this is what I've also got to try and point out. You know what I've said before in the past? That just because they are not doing anything, like, people take that as a good sign. No. Do not take that as a good sign, because Campbell doing nothing, or these reform councils doing nothing, is also bad, because they miss out on funding. That means they're not really doing their job properly. So no news is good news is just as bad on that one. So anyway, back to this. So they said no news is good news, but with at least hopes that the mayor is, of course, trying to work behind the scenes whilst avoiding any major crises. Although Chris did admit that the mayor's first 6 months had not been earth-shattering. In Beverly, of course, Jean White and Kevin Bulness were, of course, a very similar situation to those, of course, in Hull. Jean said they were, of course, unaware of what he has done. However, Jean did add that they shouldn't be, of course, overly critical, as they, of course, didn't know what he was promising to do. And they were, of course, at least confident that things are, of course, still in the process, as Campbell is, of course, the region's first mayor and is, of course, leading an infant authority. That excuse only lasts so long. Remember, when Campbell had been set up and won in May, there were 2 other regional authorities in Yorkshire that had already been going a year. What have, they are going to be compared of what they did in their first year to Campbell and what they did in his first year. And so far in his first 6 months, not like Campbell's done a lot. In West Yorkshire, you've got the regional mayor wanting to bring back trams into the region and putting forward quite a very ambitious tram plan for Leeds, which is very, very interesting to see in that front. So they can do stuff. These mayors are quite important, but Luke Campbell is not doing anything, and that is just as bad. Which I always try and get across to you in that. Just because doesn't seem to be anything going on, don't think that's a very good sign either. So also, of course, in Beverly, Trevor and Lynn also had very similar news to Leslie in Hull, saying that at least Mr. Campbell is, quote, a nice guy and a good boxer, but this is, of course, a big job and you need experience. Which, again, very true indeed. So I think that's it, really. So that's what the people think. We don't know what he's done. You've been in place 6 months. What have you done? Not a lot. Let's face it, not a lot. Yes, of course, this is a new administration, but it's not like he's done anything either. So next May, then what? If you're here in this time, and other people can point to what's been going on in other these authorities with these other regional mayors, it doesn't look very good. Same for Andrew Jenkins as well. So there will be, and I think Campbell's inexperience will be very, very, very much so a detriment to Reform UK. It's just how it's going to work out. Will it be just his complete lack of inexperience? The fact that you put someone who didn't know what they were doing, because you could easily next time this comes up for election, you could very easily put forward a candidate who basically just goes, yeah, Luke Campbell in 4 years has done nothing. This is what I'm going to do. And just run them against that. So it's not looking good. 6 months in, you've got the people in your region basically going, we don't know what he's done. you know, you get, of course, his lack of political experience. I know he's a good boxer, but this isn't a boxing fight. So we'll see what happens. But it's very, very clear that a lot of people are clocking on to the fact that, well, he hasn't done anything. And don't get me wrong, just don't be, he hasn't done anything. That's just as bad. That's just as bad, because that means as a regional mayor, he's in charge of like economic planning and things like that in your region. What's he doing on that front? How many jobs has that area and that region missed out on because of Luke Campbell's inexperience? There's a ton of stuff, he's missing out on, and because he's in power there. So, as always, let me know what you think about this, especially, of course, if you are from Hull. What do you think, of course, about your regional mayor, about Mr. Campbell? Do you agree with the people that we've seen before, that you are unsure, of course, of what he's done? We saw, of course, he had a very rocky start. So this idea of, he's done nothing. No, there was a couple of scandals right at the start, but since then, there's not been anything. It's like, well, what's he actually done? So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. And of course, we'll see you all next time.